Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday morning. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté, and this, of course, is the show where we watch the Sunday morning news show so that you don't have to. And man, oh man, will you be happy you didn't have to this week, because the world is crumbling before us. We're on the brink of a new escalation in the Middle East thanks to Joe Biden's genius strategy of giving Israel all the weaponry it wants to continue massacring innocent people in Gaza and escalating to assassinating whoever it wants in Iran and Lebanon. And yeah, so we're here to break it all down for you with some of the worst people in the world on cable news.
Aaron, I think you mean that Biden is having tough conversations with Netanyahu. That's what you mean.
Oh, yes. Well, that's the spin we're getting, that this
Yeah.
time Biden's really fed up with Netanyahu. He's not going to
Yeah.
take it anymore.
Yeah.
Yes, this really is it.
And by the way, to show your appreciation for our watching these shows, which is very uncomfortable, unpleasant experience, please do like the stream, tweet it out, share it on the social medias, and just hit the like button. There you go. So should we start with our first clip?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. This is a real doozy. We're going to hear from a friend of show who we haven't heard from in a while, John Kirby on Fox News.
Joining us now is White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby. Admiral, thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be with you, Jack.
John, last week, the president met with the Israeli prime minister in the Oval Office for the first time in 4 years, and they talked about progress toward a ceasefire. Days later, the U.S. is sending warships and fighter jets to defend Israel from Iranian retaliation, and the region appears on the brink of a wider war. Did Netanyahu keep President Biden in the dark?
I won't speak to the decision-making out of Tel Aviv or to the prime minister in his office. I would just say a couple of things. Number one, we still believe a ceasefire deal is the best way to bring this war to an end. It's also, we believe, very possible. We still believe the gaps are narrow enough to close. The other thing that we've been doing since the 7th of October is making sure that not only Israel has what it needs to defend itself, but that this war doesn't escalate to become something broader, a regional war, a regional conflict. And that's what you're seeing us do, continuing this week by sending additional forces to the region. Look, when the Supreme Leader says he's going to avenge, we have to take that seriously. Now, I don't know what they're going to do or when they're going to do it, but we got to make darn sure that we're ready and that we have the capabilities in the region to be able to help Israel defend itself. And quite frankly,
so when he says we have to make sure to keep helping Israel defend itself, what he means is we have to keep ensuring that Israel has all the weaponry it needs to slaughter defenseless people in Gaza by the tens of thousands and block all attempts at a ceasefire. And inevitably,
and also assassinate people.
Yeah, exactly. And inevitably, as this continues, and Israel needs a reason to keep prolonging this conflict and even try to draw the U.S. deeper in, then it goes to neighboring countries and continues assassinating people, including Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas in Tehran. And John Kirby wants us to think that all this is a part of his genius Biden administration strategy of calming tensions, when meanwhile in real life tens of thousands of people are being slaughtered and the war is extending to multiple different countries, namely Iran and Lebanon. I mean, it's just and of course, because on Fox News, the critique of the Biden administration is that they're not militaristic enough. They're not supportive of Israeli aggression enough. None of this will get challenged, as it will pretty much nowhere else either. But, it's you think now, anytime you have a situation where you're at risk of regional war, that's a sign your strategy, putting aside all the body bags you created in Gaza, that's a sign your strategy has not worked.
Yeah. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. Yeah, your strategy isn't working when regional war is more likely than ever.
And remember, we played that clip before on the show of Biden back in October on 60 Minutes, where he was asked by 60 Minutes, hey, is it a good idea? And do you think we can sustain two wars at the same time in both Ukraine and Israel-Palestine? And Biden was offended at the question. Of course we can sustain two wars. Right. We're the essential nation, he said. We're the United States of America. So he's been bragging about his ability to fuel conflict and indignant at the suggestion that he couldn't. And so this is what we get today. This is a direct result of Biden's commitment to war, not his desire to stop it.
Yeah. And also a reminder, speaking of things that Biden has said in the past, it's nice to remember that he said during the interview that it certainly seems like Netanyahu is extending this war for political reasons, so he doesn't have to go to jail. So that's good to keep in mind as John Kirby pretends that the U.S. wants a ceasefire.
Defend our own people, our own facilities, our own national security interests.
Well, to that point, it appears the president's frustrated with Netanyahu. Axios reported this week that Biden, quote, warned Netanyahu if he escalates again, he shouldn't count on the U.S. to bail him out, the U.S. official said. Leaking that detail to a...
You know, what's funny about this story is it also says that Biden told Netanyahu, he said, okay, fine. If Iran retaliates this time, we are gonna bail you out. But don't escalate again. It's like telling a kid who's like been caught stealing or lying multiple times. All right, I'll let you off the hook this time, but don't do it again. Okay?
One more time. This is your last chance.
Yeah. I'm gonna let you keep going to like I don't know. I'm not gonna ground you this time, but do it one more time. I promise. Like that's it.
Right. Also, can we take a moment to remember that the U.S. has a history of vetoing ceasefire proposals? So it's a little rich for Kirby to ask us to believe that they actually care about a ceasefire.
Oh yeah. Well, they've blocked it so many times now. We've lost count. And and they've also said, by the way, that Hamas is the sole obstacle to a ceasefire deal. But now, because Netanyahu has just become, I guess, so like out of control and so emboldened by them, and why wouldn't he be after getting so many standing ovations from Congress just last week? He or last month, that like now they finally admitted that Netanyahu really should take the ceasefire deal. Like they're acknowledging now that he's like not taking it on purpose, which is like that's one lie they've been forced to kind of walk back.
Domestic audience might send one message, but are you at all concerned that a foreign audience seeing that might be daylight between the U.S. and Israel and only embolden Iran?
We've been very...
Once again, it is so hilarious that the media actually thinks, the media and politicians actually say out loud that it's dangerous to suggest there's any daylight between the United States and Israel. Like, it is such a pathological relationship that anything but identical policies and totally being in lockstep is considered abnormal. Like, is there any distinction between Israel and the United States? Are you anything but conjoined twins? Because if so, that's a problem.
Very, very consistent about not wanting to see this war escalate and get broader. We've also been very, very consistent about proving, not just with words, but with action, that we're going to stand up and defend Israel. I mean, on April 13th, when Iran launched 300 missiles and drones, the United States had aircraft, fighter planes in the air to knock them down. We've now...
Notice how he never says what Iran was responding to, right? In this recent issue, and also the one he mentioned before, in both cases, it's as if Iran, out of the blue, launches these attacks.
That's true. Yeah. And in that case, it was after Israel bombed an Iranian diplomatic facility in Damascus and killed a bunch of people.
Right.
Which is an act of war against Iran, because diplomatic buildings are considered sovereign territory of the country that occupies it.
Right. But Aaron, that was actually Israel defending itself. Sorry that you are such an anti-Semite that you can't see it.
Added now additional naval and air assets to the region to help defend Israel again. I think we've proven time and time again that we're going to support Israel.
And very quickly, because I have two other topics to ask you about, was the vice president briefed on the decision to send warships? Did she agree? And has she communicated to Netanyahu that she intends to continue Biden's policy toward Israel?
I won't speak to future policies that that the vice president might enact should she become elected. That's well beyond the scope of my expertise. But she absolutely was party and part of the decision to add additional resources.
Good to know. Good to know that Kamala was in the room when Biden told Netanyahu, okay, I'm really mad at you, but I am going to send a bunch of military deployments to back you up. I'm going to send thousands of more soldiers, or however many it is. People who sign up to defend the U.S. ostensibly now being sent off to defend a foreign apartheid state. And good to know that Kamala Harris was in the room and approves of what Joe Biden's doing.
Yeah, I mean, she's so radically different from Joe Biden. Remember the Republicans were saying that she's not a friend to Israel?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah, and then there are leftists who think that she's, represents some change from Biden when we've seen no evidence of that yet. The one thing is, and I will say this, I don't think you can do worse than Joe Biden. Anybody else I think is better, because he's such an unhinged warmonger that just by virtue of him not being on the ticket, not being president, I do think that is an improvement no matter who it is. I really
What
do.
about if it's Trump?
Would Trump be better than Biden? Probably not. But given that, Biden's in the pocket of like pro-Israel donors like Haim Saban, and Trump has the Adelson fortune behind him. But at the same time, honestly,
They're probably the same, right?
Well, I don't think you can do worse than Biden.
Yeah.
And did Trump do a lot to contribute to the situation? Yes, he did. But Biden is such a few people in U.S. politics are as like spiritually committed to warmongering like Joe Biden.
Right.
Like Trump will go along with the warmongers he appoints, which he did. But in terms of someone who's like deeply committed to warmongering and is proud of it, a few people compared to Joe Biden in U.S. history. Okay, well, let's hear more from the Biden administration and their genius strategy of containing escalation while simultaneously fueling it at every opportunity. And here is Useful Idiot's fan favorite, Deputy National Security Advisor, former Washington Post reporter, by the way, Jonathan Feiner.
And goatee rocker.
Start with the fact that the United States, the United Kingdom, and Jordan are advising citizens to get out of Lebanon right now. Is the Biden administration anticipating Israel will strike inside Lebanon soon, or how real is the risk that a second front could open up in Lebanon?
Well, Ed, what we're trying to do is prepare for any eventuality, any possibility. That's only responsible for the United States. Obviously, we've been quite clear that we'll work with our ally Israel to defend itself against any threats that it faces, and we are in a moment that appears to be of heightened threat. So what we have said to our own citizens is should they choose to or desire to leave Lebanon, the time to do that would be while commercial options are available, as they currently are. Beyond that, obviously, these are personal decisions that we will leave.
By the way, speaking of personal decisions, only Israel has the right to defend itself, according to the U.S. Only Israel. Iran doesn't have the right to defend itself. Lebanon doesn't have the right to defend itself. Palestinians don't have the right to defend themselves. Only Israel has the right to defend itself. And by Israel's right to defend itself, they mean defend its aggression and occupation, because that's what Israel is ultimately defending. If Israel wanted to defend itself, it would simply stop attacking and occupying other people and retreat to its internationally recognized borders of 1967. Instead, it's expanding its conquest of Palestinian territory and attacking anybody who dares to resist that. So that's what he means by Israel defending itself. It's a complete inversion of what defending oneself means. And meanwhile, accordingly, because Israel's right to defend itself is predicated on aggression, that means nobody else in U.S. eyes has the right to defend themselves. And therefore, we can send military deployments to the Middle East to make sure that they can't.
Right. I mean, the term, self-defense, or the idea of the right to defend yourself, it has no meaning thanks to the way the United States and Israel use it. It's just absolutely devoid of any significance. It's like
to people to make.
It's an inversion, actually. It's like, as you said, they have the right. They have the right to be the aggressor, not to defend itself.
Exactly.
Travel advisory to level 4, which discourages Americans from traveling to Lebanon, and we are preparing for whatever may come. But this is no prediction about future events. It is prudent planning for them and for our government.
Is that
all right? So that's something that the Biden administration is tangibly doing to reduce tensions. They're telling people don't go to Lebanon, and if you're in Lebanon, leave. Catch the first flight out. Not, hey, we're gonna stop arming Israel, which is threatening everybody. Just if you're in Israel's crosshairs, get out.
Right.
So if you can. Sorry, if you're in Gaza, sorry you can't because you're trapped in a concentration camp. If you're in Lebanon, though, take a hike.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing to mitigate the situation.
Yeah. And that's not a prediction, Aaron. That's called prudent planning. PP, not the other P.
why the U.S. is deploying additional fighter squadron to the Middle East and moving in other naval vessels?
So you're referring to the announcement that was made on Friday, where the United States and our Pentagon said that we are moving a carrier aircraft carrier group to the region and some additional air assets. That is entirely focused on defending Israel against potential threats it may face, and out of our desire to both deter those threats, defend against them, and ultimately de-escalate this situation and avoid it sliding into a regional war. We obviously had a very close call on a broader regional conflict on April 13th when the United States worked very closely with Israel and with our other partners and allies to defeat a threat and an attack that Iran made against Israel. And should that situation arise again?
Well, the best thing to do after a close call, when you almost have a regional war, is to say, you know what, let's double down on our current strategy and risk it again. Why not? Right? That was a close call, but we missed it. So, hey,
Right.
let's keep rolling the dice and let's keep arming
Yeah.
Israel and blocking a ceasefire, which is
let's
what
try.
they did.
Let's try again. If at first you don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again. Great song.
And we want to be prepared to do it. But the overall goal is to turn the temperature down in the region, deter and defend against those attacks, and avoid regional conflict, which has been our goal really since October 7th.
I want to start.
You know, his line there about our goal is to turn the temperature down. I mean, there's something really gruesome about it, because as he's saying that, literally Palestinian kids were being burned alive with U.S. bombs. Because Israel on Sunday attacked 2 different schools where people were sheltering in Gaza. So as John Feiner is claiming, our goal is to turn the temperature down. Kids in Gaza are literally burning alive. And that's how he thinks, and his colleagues think, that they're turning the temperature down, simply by making sure that the slaughter is confined to Gaza. And they're hoping now to avoid a wider disaster. But they've done everything they can to, despite their claims that they want to de-escalate, they've done everything they can to escalate by insisting on arming Israel to the teeth and blocking a ceasefire. All right. More John Feiner, because
Yeah, we got
meanwhile,
more John Feiner.
like, remember, like, the whole hostages thing, there's all these captives still in Gaza, and the U.S. and Israel are ostensibly committed to returning them, when meanwhile Netanyahu is blocking every possible opportunity to free them. Well, John Feiner has to address that too.
President Biden said that assassination hasn't helped efforts to negotiate a ceasefire and free hostages from Gaza. Axios reporter and CNN analyst Barak Ravid reports that top Israeli security and intelligence officials are concerned that Prime Minister Netanyahu does not want to move forward with a ceasefire for hostages deal. Does the president think Netanyahu is trying to avoid a deal?
Well, Dana, I won't speak to the private conversations that take place between the president and the prime minister. What I will say is these are 2 people who have a 4-decade-plus relationship. One of the extraordinary assets in the U.S.-Israel relationship is this personal relationship between these 2 leaders, in which they can speak to each other directly and candidly. That's been the case since President Biden came to office. It's certainly been the case since October 7th.
Okay, everyone, fear not. Biden and Netanyahu have known each other for 40 years.
They're like this.
Yeah, they're so tight. And that's had really wonderful results so far. Things are going great because of that relationship. And yes, he is leaving the hostages, the captives, to die because he doesn't care about them. He's much more concerned with destroying Gaza and killing as many people as he can there. That is his overriding objective. And if that means letting the Israeli captives die and continue to suffer, Netanyahu is totally fine with that. And apparently Biden, his friend of 40 years, is fine with that too. Because what is he doing to stop Netanyahu? Nothing.
Right. Literally, his answer to that question of whether or not Netanyahu wants a deal or sabotaging a deal is Biden and Netanyahu are besties. That's his response.
Yeah. And now, Katie, Dana Bash actually mentioned this, that some Israeli officials are even saying that Netanyahu doesn't want a deal. You wanted to show this comment from an Israeli.
This is kind of an amazing tweet from an Israeli who, up until, is kind of supportive of the government, very naively admitted that he totally believed Israel's claims about the sexual abuse committed by Hamas. And then when he realized that the Israeli government was covering up sexual abuse committed by Israeli soldiers, and also he couldn't believe that the Knesset members were defending it, he has been looking somewhat critically at what's happening. And he tweeted out, a very difficult meeting took place yesterday between the heads of the Israeli security services and Netanyahu over the hostages. It ended with the PM slamming the table and calling them weak. And if you scroll down, these are some quotes. So the head of Shin Bet said, it seems like the prime minister does not want the framework on the table. If that is so, tell us. An IDF negotiator says, you know that the parameters you added will not be accepted and there will be no deal. With what you are telling us, there is nowhere to go. We are at zero. Head of Mossad said there is a deal. If we wait, we may miss the opportunity. We need to take it. And Netanyahu's response is, you are weak. You don't know how to negotiate. You are putting words in my mouth instead of pushing the prime minister. Go push Sinwar. So there you go.
So that is our ally and Biden's BFF of 40 years. So
Yeah.
thankfully, these two are so close, they can have frank conversations. And maybe Netanyahu is telling Biden that he's soft too, if Biden dares suggest that he
Right.
make a deal. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Certainly, that's what Netanyahu thinks. Okay, let's turn to more John Feiner, because the administration is celebrating a rare success, which is that they did negotiate a prisoner swap this week with Russia that freed several people, including Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, and also some Russian dissidents. And here's John Feiner welcoming the news.
Of the prisoner swap with Russia this week, what can you tell us about the condition of the freed Americans?
Well, I won't speak to their private health information or anything like that. What I will say is we had the privilege to speak to and listen to the president speak to the Americans right after they were released, when they were still sitting on the tarmac in Turkey, and the president and their families were gathered in the Oval Office, and they showed just extraordinary strength. They were overwhelmingly happy, as were the family members who were sitting with the president. It was quite a moving scene. We were also able, as I think you know, along with the president and the vice president, to welcome them back to U.S. soil at Andrews Air Base that same night. And what we saw, frankly, was a scene you don't often get to witness when you do national security and foreign policy work, which was just a lot of happiness and joy.
That's correct. You don't get to see happiness and joy when you do foreign policy, national security work, because you're spreading misery and death around the world.
Right. Yeah.
That's a rare kind of honest admission from a national security state bureaucrat. Yeah, we don't do happiness and joy. And the reason why is because we spread sadness and carnage everywhere.
Right. Yeah, it's hard when you dedicate yourself to bombing and dividing and conquering and ecocide and getting in the way of negotiations. It's actually hard to find a lot of joy in that, surprisingly. Who would have thought?
All right. Well, thank you, John Feiner, for that one. Okay, but somebody who has criticisms of the hostage deal, because I think because any act of diplomacy just makes this guy's skin crawl. He gets like some sort of a physical reaction, is Senator Tom Cotton.
Tom Cotton.
Tonight, the former president congratulated Vladimir Putin for the prisoner exchange, suggesting that he had extorted he has in recent days suggested that he extorted the United States by getting this deal. You yourself haven't actually weighed in on what you make of this agreement. Do you agree with the former president that Putin got a better deal here?
Well, of course, we all join in the joy for the family and friends of the American hostages that were released. We're always welcoming them back.
Always?
I would also question the notion that this human is capable of joy.
Right.
You know what I mean? I just don't know if I buy it, that this entity here is capable of producing joy. I don't know. Can he access that? I don't know.
I actually agree. You know, he should work for the he should swap with John Feiner, because then he wouldn't miss out on any of the joy, because he can't feel joy anyway. Just a thought.
Unfortunately, that joy is tempered by the reality that there are going to be more hostages in the future, and families are going to have to grieve for their absence in the future, because Vladimir Putin.
Unfortunately, that joy is tempered by my inability to feel joy.
Right.
And my commitment to sowing death and carnage around the world in the name of hegemony.
Just like the Ayatollahs have played Joe Biden and Kamala Harris like a fiddle. I mean, there's even reports suggesting that Putin specifically took Evan Gershkovich hostage because of previous failed hostage exchanges between the Biden-Harris administration and Russia, because he was a prominent reporter for a prominent global media company.
I mean, this is really stupid. Evan Gershkovich was at a really sensitive Russian military site asking really sensitive questions about Russian military production, that if a Russian reporter did the same thing in the US, they would have been arrested as well. It doesn't mean he deserved to be charged with espionage, and I wish he had been freed on day one, but he was doing something really, I think, actually reckless. And I think his editors of the Wall Street Journal need to be answering what they were thinking in sending him on the assignment, because they put him in a lot of danger, and it ended up costing him, his freedom for more than a year. But the idea that Putin just snapped him, like just grabbed him randomly because of it's ridiculous. If a Russian reporter was doing what Evan Gershkovich was doing, I'm pretty sure he would have been arrested as well.
What you see now is that there's a market for this kind of hostage taking. That's why the Ayatollahs take hostages, because they got $6 billion from Joe Biden. You didn't have that with Donald Trump. He got more than 50 hostages back to the United States without paying a dime of ransom or having any high-profile prisoner exchange. He also was willing to use our military to conduct hostage rescue missions, another thing that Joe Biden has never done. So, of course, we joined.
Yeah, including one in Somalia where, like, people died, including some U.S. military forces, I believe. So this idea that like doing dangerous rescue missions is like the way to do it rather than diplomacy.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like risking everyone's lives. Like, I'll have to check the exact country. It was either Somalia or Kenya or something, but definitely I'm pretty positive that Trump ordered a mission that turned deadly and did not go very well. So that's not, I don't think it's something to brag about.
Well, no, but that's a win-win for someone like Tom Cotton, who's like a merchant of death and kind of a fan of death. And also, again, he can't feel joy. So whatever he can do to create the opposite of joy, he's happy about.
Mark Ames, a journalist and co-host of Radio Warner, made a good point. He said he wondered if Julian Assange being freed was somehow tied to or somehow linked to this hostage deal, because if possibly Russia was demanding that Julian Assange be freed, just as the U.S. demanded that some Russian dissidents were freed, that would have embarrassed Biden. So they reached a plea deal with Assange before. Or if that wasn't the case, if Russia wasn't asking for Assange to be freed, then even just the fact that that Russia would be freeing dissidents while the U.S. will be still holding Julian Assange, that would have also embarrassed Biden regardless. So it's just interesting to think about whether Assange's freedom was somehow tied to this deal, that it was awkward to negotiate for the release of a journalist like Evan Gershkovich while still locking up Julian Assange, for a lot longer too. His persecution went on for over a decade.
And rejoicing at the return of the American hostages, but we have to realize that if Kamala Harris is elected president, it is once again going to be open season on Americans overseas.
What would a deal under a Trump administration have looked like?
Well, part of the point is that you might not have had these hostages taken in the first place. There's Wall Street Journal reporting that indicates that the Germans went forward with this now because they believe that Vladimir Putin was scared of Donald Trump becoming president again. Again, we don't have to speculate.
Guarantee that no.
Okay, so this is another one. Yeah, the reason Putin reached his deals because he was afraid of Donald Trump, which plays into this Trump talking point that like nothing bad would ever happen in the world because everyone's too scared of me. Like Hamas wouldn't have done October 7th, Russia wouldn't have been in Ukraine, and now, Putin was forced to act now because he's afraid of Trump being elected in a few months. It's so ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous. It really is. Yeah.
And by the way, the deadly hostage mission I was talking about was in Yemen. So a Navy SEAL was killed under Trump's watch while carrying out a rescue mission. So that's part of Trump's record of success, is getting people killed.
Right. And for someone like Cotton, it is a win-win because it brings death and destruction, and it also doesn't involve diplomacy, which he hates.
Okay, well, someone who also hates diplomacy is Lindsey Graham. Let's hear his deep thoughts on the U.S.-Russia prisoner swap.
Biden and Harris.
Well, Senator, more broadly, how does this prisoner swap affect the war in Ukraine? Because there's been somewhat of a stir in Kyiv that the complex negotiations between Russia and the West show that they can get things done, and that might have some consequences for their country, which is surviving on borrowed money or donated money and also weapons. So what does this mean for Ukraine?
I think the best thing for Ukraine is for them to continue to resist the Russian invasion. The weapons we're sending them, they're using to good effect. At the end of the day, I think the Iranians see this as yet another sign of weakness. The more thugs like Putin get rewarded for doing bad things, the more bad things you will get. So I
just really genius thinking here. So
Yeah.
you remember when Biden in Graham's eyes wasn't sending enough weapons to Ukraine, that was sending a message to China to go invade where, Katie?
Taiwan.
Now somehow Iran is picking up weakness because there was a deal to free some prisoners between the US and Russia. It's like everywhere. Everything is connected. Any sign of diplomacy is weakness, and some bad guy country that we've designated as a bad guy is going to pick up on it.
If he weren't a sitting senator, he would just really sound like a conspiracy theorist, like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist.
Exactly. Yes. That applies to pretty much almost everybody in Washington at this point. Yeah.
I'm worried that the Iranians and the Chinese are watching, making all of our enemies more provocative, not less.
The White House touted the
more provocative. They love to use that word, provocative.
Yeah, as if he's not provocative, like telling, literally calling on Israel to bomb Iran last week.
Yeah,
he's very measured. He's very calm, cool, and collected. Yeah.
That's not provocative.
Importance of diplomacy and alliances in making this prisoner exchange happen. Listen to this.
I would say that if you had not had Joe Biden sitting in the Oval Office, I don't think this would have happened.
President Trump has been skeptical about the value of NATO. There are
I agree
concerns,
with that,
though, Senator, that there are concerns that President Trump might even withdraw the U.S. from NATO. Is this a time for President Trump to make clear what his NATO policy is?
Well, he had 4 years as president, and NATO contributed more to the common defense than any time since the founding of NATO. Here's what NATO should understand about a second Trump term. You better pay your fair share. It's not unfair to have NATO contribute more. 2% is not unreasonable. He's going to insist they do more. But this all started when we withdrew from Afghanistan. That set in motion a reign of terror on this planet. And Kamala Harris said publicly on camera she was the last person in the room with President Biden before he decided to withdraw all forces from Afghanistan. If that is true, and she encouraged him to withdraw, she should never be in another room again making an important decision because she doesn't know what she's doing.
Senator, I want to get to one.
Okay, so, I mean, yeah.
What's the reign of terror that followed the pulling out from Afghanistan?
Well, it was done in a disastrous way. I mean, there was the attack at in Kabul that killed many people, including U.S. soldiers. So that's what they're talking about. But around the world, a reign of terror because the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan. And meanwhile, of course, what he's omitting is that there was a reign of terror for 20 years with the U.S. occupying Afghanistan, which doesn't count as terror because we're the ones doing it. But
that was a reign of American terror.
Yeah. And of course, what was the result of the U.S. invading Afghanistan? It meant that Al-Qaeda and its allies, after being confined to like a very small mountainous area in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region, like that border area, that they spread from there to all around the world. So that's what the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan sparked, is Al-Qaeda spreading from a very small region to being all around the world. So great job, Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, I don't think he considers also like our invasion of Iraq to have caused a reign of terror.
Oh, no, certainly not. And there was that study saying that like what's considered terrorism increased exponentially as a result of the invasion of Iraq, as, of course, anti-war voices predicted it would way back when. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, let's turn to something else that we need Lindsey Graham's wisdom on. And Trump is in a pretty bad place when Lindsey Graham is basically urging him to be less racist. And that's the predicament that Lindsey Graham finds himself in now, with Trump insisting on commenting on his opinion about Kamala Harris's ethnic identity. So this is more Lindsey Graham.
has raised some incendiary questions about the vice president's racial identity. He reposted an image of her birth certificate on Truth Social this week after a lot of criticism for this comment. Listen here.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
Doesn't this kind of language alienate millions of black voters, including from your state?
Yeah, 30% of my state is African American. Nikki Haley is of Indian heritage, and one of her children married an African American Clemson football player. So here's what I would say to President Trump. The problem I have with Kamala Harris is not her heritage, it's her judgment. She has been wrong about everything. When she tried to explain what she would do about inflation and an upcoming recession, it made no sense. It's gibberish. She's been in the witness protection program. Nobody will ask her a hard question. Every day we're talking about her heritage and not her terrible, dangerous liberal record throughout her entire political life. Is a good day for her and a bad day for us. So I would encourage President Trump to
Yeah, and look, when Kamala's record was discussed in the Democratic primary in 2020, as a prosecutor, that's what actually created her campaign, because it was so punitive, and she was really into basically locking people up, including disproportionately black people. Now, Republicans actually support those policies, so they can't get her on that. But just like the fact that Lindsey Graham has to be appealing to Trump to not be a bigot is just, it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny.
Also, I think most people understand that you can be multiple things at a time. Like you can be black and Indian. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, well, Trump doesn't want to understand that because he was coasting because Joe Biden was such a terrible candidate. But now that he doesn't have Joe Biden anymore, he's like returning to his familiar, his safety blanket of chauvinism and race baiting, like Republicans have their own version of identity politics. Like they love to rail against identitarianism on the Democratic side. And I think there is a critique there of Democrats to be made, but Republicans have their own version of it, which is like basically it's racism, and also calling anyone who criticizes Israel anti-Semitic. And Trump's been basically doing that, like baselessly with Kamala Harris, saying that like she's like anti-Jewish because, and he can't. It's not even true that she's critical of Israel. She's not, but he's pretending that she is, and she's using that to say that she's like against Jewish people. So, I mean, this is real. Kamala just being in the race and Joe Biden not being in the race is just showing, I think, what a terrible candidate Trump is, and how he can't stop himself to the point where now Lindsey Graham has to go on Fox News to appeal to him to stop.
Prosecute the case against Kamala Harris's bad judgment.
It doesn't seem that he's received that message yet. I mean, he had an introductory speaker last night sort of double down on this conversation. Would you advise that he just stop talking about that?
I think, Mr. President, this is your election to lose. It's important you win to reset a broken border and get the world in good order. The American people are looking to have their problems solved. I think your presidency was an incredible presidency for national security and prosperity.
Look at him directly addressing Trump, right? Yeah. He's going on Fox News to like directly address Trump, to kiss his feet and ask him to tone down the bigotry when it comes to Kamala. It's this is where Republicans are at. It's pretty sad.
Do you remember? People may have forgotten this, but Trump and Graham used to be real enemies. I mean, he's encouraging Trump to do certain things and discouraging, but he's certainly not chastising him. It's like he's giving him strategic, tactical, political advice. But there was a time when Trump and Graham hated each other, and Trump actually gave out Lindsey Graham's personal phone number at a rally, and then Lindsey Graham made a video smashing his phone.
Yeah, and that was back in 2016, when Trump was running as an anti-establishment candidate. He was going to drain the swamp. He was criticizing neocons like Lindsey Graham and the Bush family, and he said he actually did have a message. I mean, there still was that kind of chauvinism and the xenophobia that was there for sure, but it was also about draining the swamp and being against intervention. And it worked on enough people back in 2016, but after him being in office for 4 years, it doesn't work anymore because people saw his record. And so now all he has left is basically bigotry and talking about the border still, which I still think will still appeal to a lot of people, but he's being shown for who he is, and he just doesn't have anything except for, stirring up chauvinism. And even Lindsey Graham is not comfortable with it and has to appeal to him on TV. Let's see how somebody else is trying to address this issue. Let's go back to Senator Tom Cotton.
Okay with him questioning whether she's black.
Ed, he wasn't saying that what matters is how she identifies as her race. He explicitly said he didn't care. One was fine, the other was fine, both was fine. She identifies as a dangerous San Francisco liberal.
Wait, that's what Trump said? I mean, literally, there's footage of him talking about how she identifies racially and that he didn't know she was black before, and now all of a sudden she's black. Does Tom Cotton feel, unless Tom Cotton is suggesting that Trump speaks in some code, literally a secret language that he's able to decipher. He almost looks like he's doing that. He's like, well, what he really was saying.
That's exactly what he's doing. And he's trying to reset the message and get it on something that he likes, which is that Kamala Harris is a dangerous San Francisco liberal.
So ridiculous.
I do like the idea of Kamala Harris saying, I identify as a dangerous San Francisco liberal. That's how I identify. I'm dangerous. I'm from San Francisco. I'm a liberal, very dangerous. And of course, actual San Francisco liberals, in terms of leftists from San Francisco, would not count Kamala Harris as one of their own, I don't think, based on her record.
So ridiculous.
Again, Trump once donated to her election campaign when she was running for either the Senate or for some other position. Trump actually donated to her in the past. So it's these people were all once on the same side until now. But it is funny how Tom Cotton's handling it.
He's just lying through his teeth, and it's amazing. Just totally inventing history. Yeah.
All right. Should we keep on this issue, or we can skip ahead to some other topics?
And it was her attorney general re-election bid that he donated to, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
Just in case people are curious. Yeah. Let's see. What should we get to next? What do you want to do?
We can skip ahead.
Okay. Which one do you want to go to?
Let's go to JD Vance. And this is another sort of issue that Trump is facing, where he's being criticized in some circles for picking JD Vance, who hasn't given him a big boost. And Trump was asked recently if JD Vance would be ready to serve as president, and Trump basically said, it doesn't matter. The vice president doesn't matter. So here's JD Vance on Fox News, asked about whether it was a mistake for him to be selected.
Had a lot of people talking about you on both the Democrat side and the Republican side. You've heard the chatter. Some people are saying you were the wrong pick for Trump's running mate. What are you doing about it?
Well, Maria, all I can do is go out there and prosecute the case against Kamala Harris and remind people that things were more prosperous and more peaceful when Donald Trump was president. Look, I recognize that there are a lot of folks, even in the GOP establishment, and certainly on the far left, who don't like the fact that Donald Trump picked me. I actually take their criticism as a badge of honor. Of course, the media is going to attack the people they fear the most. The media is going to attack the people I think who can most effectively bring President Trump's message to a broader swath of the electorate. And I don't come from inside the Beltway, Maria. You know, I grew up as a poor kid. I didn't come from a political family or a wealthy family. I worked my way through college, through the Marine Corps, and eventually landed as Donald Trump's running mate. I think that's a story that a lot of normal Americans can empathize with. I'm not shocked that a lot of inside the Beltway media types don't like me, but their policies are the problem. Of course they don't like me because we're running to fix what they have broken.
Fair enough. And I guess the Democrats see all of that as weird.
Wow. Well, I mean, if you want to hear what other people have to say about JD Vance, we do have an interesting contrasting opinion of him coming from none other than UAW President Sean Fain.
JD Vance and himself calling himself the most labor-friendly senator in Congress helps Republicans at all with the organized labor union?
I think that's a complete joke. J.D. Vance is a fraud. He is not for working class people. I mean, let's be real. He talks about his hillbilly roots. Look, I got hillbilly roots. One lesson my parents and grandparents taught us growing up is you don't forget where you come from. I don't work for venture capitalists. I work for working class people. He went to work as a venture capitalist, you know, which goes in and destroys communities, destroys businesses, ruins people's lives. That's not someone that stands for working class people.
I'm torn here, Aaron. I'm not sure who to believe. J.D. Vance or UAW president Sean Fain? Feel real conflicted.
Yeah. I mean, I do think J.D. Vance is sounding the right notes in terms of what he should be focusing on as to make his case. Like, he's trying to present himself as being anti-establishment and using the fact he's being attacked to, like, you know, to like show that he's a threat to the people in power, which is similar to what Trump did in 2016, and it worked. But yeah, as Sean Fain points out, I mean, J.D. Vance does have working class roots, but he did go on to work for venture capitalists. And, you know, Sean Fain has been a really strong labor leader, and he's already out there for Kamala. And, you know, that is a very stark contrast. I wish we had a Democratic candidate or any candidate who had earned the working class vote. I don't think Biden or Kamala Harris have, but obviously I think someone like Sean Fain figures that like Democrats are much better for them than Republicans, and certainly according to recent history, that's certainly true. Although it's a really low bar. It's a very, very low bar.
Yeah.
Okay, more from Sean Fain on why he's supporting Kamala Harris.
And also, one other thing just to say about J.D. Vance is that people often will use their experience with adversity to then justify blaming people who also experience that for not bootstrapping their way out of it. So, and that's what his book does. It basically is like, oh, look, if you work hard, you can become successful and wealthy like I am. And all those other hillbillies are lazy. Yeah. All righty. More Sean Fain.
More Sean Fain.
President Biden stepped out of this race on July 21st, and your union endorsed the vice president 10 days later. What did she actually do to earn your endorsement?
Hey, thanks for having us, Ed. Well, I mean, many things. It's the body of work, and it's one thing we do as a union. You know, we put the membership in charge, and, you know, we listen to our members, we listen to our reps all over the country, and then we take that and move forward. But the thing we've done most of all in any election is we look at the body of work between the candidates. And when you put Kamala Harris and Donald Trump side by side, there's a very telling difference in who stands with working class people and who left working class people behind. You know, you go back to 2019 when Donald Trump was president. GM workers were on strike for 40 days. Where was Donald Trump then? What did he do or what did he say about these striking workers? You want me to know what he did? He did nothing. He said nothing. Kamala Harris, she was actually out on the picket line before it was a popular thing to do. She stood shoulder to shoulder with striking workers to say, I got your back. You know, and you go further. Lordstown, Ohio, multiple plants closed in this country when Donald Trump was president. Donald Trump told workers in Lordstown Assembly in Ohio, don't sell your houses. You want to know what he did and what he said afterwards to help change that situation? He did nothing. Workers in Lordstown got sent all over this country to GM plants, and their lives were wrecked. And you want to know what Kamala Harris and the Biden administration did and their team did? They went to work when they took over the White House. And they actually put a path forward. They located a new battery plant in Lordstown, Ohio. And now under Harris and under Biden, those workers are moving back home now. They were dislocated under Trump. So, you know, Trump's been all talk for working class people. You look at inflation. One of the biggest issues facing this country is inflation. Yeah. It's not policy driven. It's driven by corporate greed and consumer price gouging. And that's what Donald Trump stands for. The rich get richer and the working class get left behind.
You know, I mean, I can't really speak to Biden Harris's record on this because I haven't followed it too closely. I suspect he's painting a rosier picture of it than it actually is. But he is pointing out that Donald Trump was all talk. He ran in 2016 of like draining the swamp, being there for workers, and he didn't do anything. His biggest achievement was passing a tax cut that benefited the ultra wealthy like himself. And now he's being called out on that. And Republicans, if they wanted to, could take advantage of the fact that Democrats are neoliberals who have sold out the working class. But Republicans are arguably even more devoted to selling out the working class. Not arguably, they are. like historically, they are more devoted to selling out the working class than Democrats. And now, so Sean Fain has that choice, and so it's pretty clear which one he's going to make. But again, like, we can't overlook that Biden did sell out workers when he broke the railroad strike.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done plenty of bad things, but Republicans are so bad that it's, I guess, for unions, it's not a hard call.
Yeah, and also I forgot to mention this, but just speaking to how disingenuous JD Vance is, he started something, a charity that was supposed to deal with opioid addiction, because obviously he comes from a place where that's a major problem, and it was he actually used, it was called Our Ohio Renewal, and he actually used a lot of that for his own political campaigning and consulting.
Mm, mm.
So that's how much he
Well,
cares about the working man.
for our viewers who are watching this and saying, what's up with useful idiots? They're sounding kind of lib. They're, they're playing these clips that are praising Kamala Harris. Like, what's going on here? Well, don't worry.
Don't worry.
This is useful idiots. After all, we are equal opportunity, making fun of everybody. And Kamala Harris has to deal with the fact that her positions have really changed. And the question to Sean Fain, they're like, "What has Kamala done to win your vote?" was a good one. Was a good one because she hasn't done anything yet in terms of campaign promises, because she doesn't really have a policy platform yet. Her website is bereft of policies.
But there's merch. There's merch, Aaron.
there is merch. But what Kamala Harris has done is she has abandoned previous policy positions that she held, including supporting Medicare for all. And when she was running in the 2020 primary, when she had to face off against Bernie Sanders, who's an actual progressive, who was, signature issue is Medicare for all, Kamala Harris said that, healthcare is not a privilege, it's a right. And lo and behold, right after she got the Democratic nod, after Biden dropped out, her campaign announced that she was no longer supportive of Medicare for all. So here is California Senator LaFonza Butler asked about Kamala Harris's shifting positions.
Mary, the vice president praised the defund the police movement, and now she says she doesn't support defunding the police. She called for decriminalizing crossing the border illegally. Now she supports President Biden's policies for clamping down at the border. She supports.
Sorry, I just have to give a shout out to Mike McGinty, who came up with the term Kamala chameleon. Kamala chameleon. Pretty good. Okay.
Supported Medicare for all at one point, eliminating private insurance, and her campaign says she doesn't support that now. She's reversed herself on a fracking ban. What do you think that voters should think when she's reversed herself on several issues just in the last 4 years?
I think that voters should think that she's a human being who learns new things every single day.
She learns how to sell out every single day. She learns how to betray her principles.
She learns from donors what to say.
Exactly.
And what positions to retract. That's what she learns from the people really in charge, which is the ultra wealthy, who tell her what to say and what positions to abandon, including what she previously she literally said, that healthcare is not just a privilege, it's a right. But now she's saying sorry, actually, it's no longer a right. I don't support it anymore.
It's now a privilege.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand going in the opposite direction, right? I understand thinking that healthcare is a privilege, and then something happens to you or something happens to someone you know, or you just become more compassionate and you realize, oh, actually, it is a right, not a privilege. I don't understand seeing it as a right, and then seeing it not as a right, but as a privilege.
Yeah, that time when I said that, not going bankrupt because you get sick is a right. I think I'm gonna have to go with actually privilege now. I've done some thinking. I've learned some new things. I'm growing. I'm growing as a human being.
Person. And my capacity for accepting people dying because they don't have enough money is really growing. I'm leaving my comfort. What is it? I'm leaving my comfort zone. Yeah.
All right. Well, there we have it. She's a human being. She's learning new things every single day, including that it's okay for people to die if they can't afford healthcare. Right. I think that's the lesson that Kamala Harris has picked up. All right. Well, since we're talking about elections, let's talk about the election in Venezuela. We covered it on last week's Useful Idiots with Anya Parenpil. And the Biden administration, shockingly, after carrying the baton for Trump's effort to overthrow Nicolas Maduro, is now declaring that Nicolas Maduro definitely lost the race, and they want Maduro to leave. And they've already recognized Edmundo Gonzalez, who is Maduro's opponent, a veteran of Venezuelan politics. He was involved in the dirty wars in Central America in the 80s, helping the U.S. Armed death squads. So he's got a long, distinguished record. And naturally, someone like that is going to be suitable to lead Venezuela in the eyes of the U.S. So that's who they're recognizing as the president. Let's go back to our friend, Useful Idiots fan favorite, Jonathan Feiner.
Bring you to a situation in this hemisphere, in Venezuela specifically, the situation quite grim. The Secretary of State on Friday said that the opposition candidate won more votes than Nicolas Maduro. He also spoke with opposition leaders. Did the opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, win that election?
Yeah, look, we've been quite clear about that Edmundo Gonzalez got the most votes in this election. And what I think is interesting about the current moment is that you have seen very few countries come out and ratify what the Maduro regime has claimed, which is that it won the election. You have seen a number of countries take a position that we've taken based on a whole range of factors, not just what the opposition claims, but exit polls, quick counts that took place based on a significant percentage of actual data, tally sheets from precinct-level voting places in Venezuela that suggest not only that Edmundo Gonzalez won, but that he won with quite a considerable margin. And so what we are focused on now is conveying to the regime that it needs to focus on
Side note, whenever it's a government who we want to overthrow their regime, whenever it's a government that is even more autocratic, far more autocratic, they're not a regime. So, for example, right. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, not a regime. Maduro, regime. Even though, like, the Maduro-Chavez movement has won multiple elections, has the support of millions of people, they're a regime because we want regime change. So, therefore, they can be called a regime.
Right.
Believes that it won this election, showing its work, showing the data, which it has refused to do. And I think we know the reasons why that is the case. And if not, embark on a transition back to democratic norms in Venezuela. We are working very closely with key countries in the region that have influence in Venezuela to try to stay on the same page and build a coalition for a process that will ultimately lead back to a transition to democracy in Venezuela. That's been our goal from the minute this administration arrived.
But given that
No, actually, your goal since your administration arrived was to overthrow Venezuela's government. That's why you maintain Trump's murderous sanctions that have crippled Venezuela's economy and have forced people to flee. And that's what they're continuing now. And as I said last week on the show, I don't know what happened with this election. I just think it's not our business. We don't have the right to weigh in on Venezuela's democracy when we've been trying to subvert it for more than 2 decades. Recall that, under Chavez in 2002, there was a coup backed by the U.S. It was the Bush administration then, but everybody applauded it, including the New York Times. And this has been going on for a very, very long time. So when you try to destroy someone else's democracy, I think you lose all credibility and all right to weigh in on it. Right. And Venezuela's been crippled by these sanctions that are the most undemocratic thing you could think of, because nobody in Venezuela voted for the Biden or Trump administration to destroy their economy, which is what they've consciously done with these sanctions. So now it's going to Venezuela's Supreme Court. We'll see how it plays out. There are people in the region who have raised some concerns about Venezuela's elections, but also rejecting this U.S.-led effort to basically push the government out. Mexico has told the U.S. to mind its own business,
right.
And I think that's the advice that we should follow.
Yeah, it's a little early for the U.S. to know the results, given that it's so allegedly so confusing. And of course, they're not. If the Venezuelans who have been protesting the election results, if they were doing that in the States, we would call them January 6ers.
Oh, yes, yeah. And also, and by the way, he cites exit polling. From what I understand in Venezuela, exit polling is difficult because, first of all, it's not encouraged because it's because it can still influence the outcome if you publish it on the day of the vote. And also, some of these firms that conduct exit polling are heavily tied to the opposition, so they're not exactly neutral.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough, and I have no idea what actually happened. I mean, we're not there, but I just don't think it's our business. That's my position.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's close out with Nancy Pelosi, who really, after reports that she helped push out Joe Biden, by basically saying that we were going to go nuclear on Joe Biden if he didn't drop out of the race because he was such a terrible candidate. Now she is back to praising him, and she has a new idea for how she wants to show her appreciation.
It's a really good one.
Good place to make whatever decision, the top of his game. Such a consequential president of the United States, a Mount Rushmore kind of president of the United States. Want to know what comes next.
That he belongs up there on Mount Rushmore. Lincoln and Joe Biden.
But you got Teddy Roosevelt up there, and he's wonderful. I don't say take him down, but you can add Biden.
Why did she add Teddy Roosevelt? I mean, it's interesting because Teddy Roosevelt was a big imperialist with a lot of blood on his hands. Maybe that's why she thinks that's a better comparison to him than Lincoln.
That's why Biden and Teddy Roosevelt deserve to be side by side, because they're both bigoted warmongers. And Biden, if there is a World War III, I just hope that the Mount Rushmore with his face on it survives it, because thanks to his policies, we're always at risk of it. And let's hope that whatever mural he gets survives whatever conflicts and disasters he generates further in the time he has left in office.
Yeah. But I also want to say that, Thomas Jefferson is up there, and there is a good parallel. I mean, Thomas Jefferson is a bit of a mixed bag, but he definitely was in favor of exterminating Native people. And there's even a quote from him from a letter that he wrote in 1813. Their barbarities justified extermination and now await our decision on their fate. And that kind of rhymes with Biden saying Israel is going after a group of people who have engaged in barbarism. I think Israel has to respond. So maybe Nancy's onto something.
There definitely is continuity in U.S. policy. And that's why the system works so great for the people in power. It's just a disaster for everybody else.
Right.
Especially those who live under U.S. Supplied bombs right now, especially in Gaza. All right. Well,
before we wrap, I just want to read two great super chats from, and thank you so much, ADEC. I suspect Bibi is trying to box Harris in. He doesn't want her to keep her support for Israel private to mollify voters. He is forcing her to own the policy. Kamala's bro-in-law and friends put forward and manage Prop 44 and CA to make it illegal for gig workers to join unions. Oh, that is a really important point, right? She is very closely associated to some terrible proposition that made it a lot harder for Uber workers to organize. So that is a defender of the working class.
Yeah, not a good sign of her working class bona fides. And we shouldn't overlook that. As bad as Trump has been, that does not mean Democrats have been much better.
Right.
Okay. Well, Katie, anything you want to plug?
No, we're doing we've been getting these great interviews with Holocaust survivors who are saying such moving things about the genocide in Gaza. Playing an interview I did with Marion Ingram, who protests outside of Biden's, outside of the White House. But these, just so people know, this week's and last week's with Holocaust survivors, those are very different. Those are done over, Zoom. The ones we're doing now are very powerful because they're in person. But
you're talking about interviews that you played on the Katie Halper show?
Yeah, sorry about that. At the Katie Halper show. Yeah.
All right. Well, our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there, support the show, get all kinds of bonus content. Thanks for tuning in to Monday morning. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.